Nakadosh Boker Or, Masechet Nazir Daf Nun Amud Aleph 50a1. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef says, Rabbi Yosef, Yomeru, they're going to say, Me'in Shachav Yuda Kaas Yosi Shatak, Yosef Shatak, which means what's going to happen? You remember they said that if right now on a kezait of a met, meaning one kezait of flesh of the deceased, you're going to come and take off the hair of the Nazir. So on the met, kol sheken, you're going to take off the hair of the Nazir. So they said, so obviously what's going on here? You don't need to say that. So says Rabbi Yosef, they're going to say that Rabbi Meir passed away, Meir Shachav. Yehuda gets angry because he didn't like, all the students of Rabbi Meir, because they were trying to always stump him. Rabbi Yosef is going to keep quiet. Torah Matei Aleh, what's going to be on the Torah? Amar Rabbi Yosef says, Rabbi Yosef, what are we dealing with? We're talking about a deceased that does not have a kazait of meat. So if he doesn't have a kazait of meat, that's why in the entire body, that's why it says the met. Because a kazait, meaning flesh, a kazait is enough. But the met, even if he has no flesh, the fact that it's a deceased, it's already going to be mitameh. Says the Gemara, but they're still going to say, al ever mimenu migaleach, al kulosh. We also saw on even an ever, even on a limb, one limb, you would have to, the Nazir would have to take off his hair and be tameh and everything. So if even on one limb, so kol sheken, the entire body. So says the Gemara, ela kedamar Rabbi Yochanan, rather Rabbi Yochanan says, lo nitzechal al nefel. We're talking about a nefel. A nefel is the fetus. Yeah, the fetus that basically before it was formed. Shelo nitkashru evarav begidin. So therefore the limbs were not joined together, right? Exactly, it's detached. Right? Hachanami, so to here we're talking about a nefel shelo nitkashru evarav begidin. Rava comes and he says, Lo nitzecha, what are we talking about? He says, we're talking about Rov binyano, shem bayan rova atzamot. When it says over here, the met, we're talking about, it's not that the met is shalem, the met is complete, it's a complete body. We're talking about bones of the met without any flesh. And mimela, there's no torat kezait, and there's no ever min met. Right? There's no ever. Everything's just bones. For example, these bones are rov binyano shel gufa adam, the majority of the body. Meaning, for example, you've got the two thighs, right? The shok v'yerech is like the thigh and the knees, right? Which is the majority of the body, or rov binyano. So it's not only the rov binyan. Rov binyan means the majority of the body, right? Here it says, for example, the tzlaot and the shidra. So we're talking about the entire skull, not the skull, but the shidra is like the spinal cord, right? With the shok and the rechaim. How do you call it? The chicken. It's the thigh leg, no? The thigh leg. It's like the meshulash basically. It's you've got the leg of the chicken, and then you've got the other parts. So it's the thigh and leg, no? The thigh and the leg. So that's what it is. Or rov minyano. Rov minyano is the majority of the bones in the body, which is 125. 125. Because if you're going to tell me that there's 248 bones in the body, right? Ramach evarim, 248 organs in the body. So majority of 248 is 125. So the Mishnah is teaching us that the Met Shalem and the Nazir is going to come and be megaleach and everything. That's even talking about a Met Katan with all these atzamot, right? That has a shiur of rova hakav. Okay? Nekuda, 2 dots. Okay. Al kezait met, val kezait netzel. On a kezait of the met and the netzel. Says the Gemara. Vezu netzel. What is a netzel now? I understand the flesh, a kezait of the flesh of the met. Fine. What is kezait netzel? He says, Basara met shekarash. It's basically the flesh of a deceased that started becoming hardened after it became rotten. Umohal sheirtiach. And there's like a liquid which is coming out, which they bubbled it up, right? And therefore it's bubbling up. So says the Gemara, what are we talking about over here? If you're going to tell me that we don't know if this belongs to the met, and maybe be'emet, right? Maybe be'emet, it's from another place and it's not tameh. So what do I care now that this liquid, right, or this moisture became congealed? What do I care? Ela diadin and who really be'emet, I already know that this belongs to a met. And even if it did not come and become congealed, it's still going to be mitameh. So even if it didn't congeal, it's still going to be mitameh.
But they say here, if you want to know.
Rabbi says, "Bistam." What does it mean, stam? We're talking about that it's beside the met, and we know that it comes from the met, but it's a safek whether the basara met is nimuach and it's tameh or not, and therefore ikarash, if it's congealed, for sure it's considered mohalu. That it comes out, right? It comes out from the body. V'lo karash, and if it does not congeal, dilma kichovinyohu. So maybe it's just kichovinyohu, which is like the phlegm, right? And that's going to be tahor, and the nazir does not come and cut off all his hair for all these things. Okay. Another deen to do with netzel. So Abaye comes and he asks Rabba, Yesh netzel be'ema or netzel? Is there a kazai basa nevela which is nimuach? Remember, nimuach means it becomes like melting, right? Does that exist also by an animal? And it's going to be mitameh b'magal masa by touching or carrying by an animal, just like by a met it does, or not? Mi amrin and do we say kigamide that when the rabbis accepted halachal Moshe Sinai the netzel, right, is going to be mitameh. It's only dati mi adam that it comes from a human being. Aval dati bin be'ema, but not on a human, not an animal. Or dimel shah, maybe there's no difference. Meaning a human being and the animal, it's the exact same name.
Except for oil.
Which one? Yeah, exactly. No, here we're talking about mamash magal masa. Magal masa means that you're actually touching it. We're not talking about the oil. Okay? You see it over there? This is good according to the mandamar that he says tuma chamura ad lager, the tuma kala ad lakelef. This is good according to the mandamar that says that tuma chamura is until the ger, and tuma kala is until the dog. What are we referring to here? Dog, ger. What's going on? He says a nevela is not metamea tuma chamura, like an avatuma, to be metamea adam v'kelim, unless it's fitting to give to a ger. Meaning like this, you remember that the nevela, who do you give the nevela to? The nevela is a kosher animal that died, right, without doing shechita. Yeah? You give it to the lager, right? You give it to the ger, or we're going to speak about the dog also in 1 second, right? So you give it to the ger. So he says, as long as it's fitting to give to a ger, right? As long as it's fitting to give to a ger, here we're not talking about a ger, a true convert. Because a true convert has to eat kosher like us. We're talking about like a ger toshav, for example, somebody that's living in Israel, but he only accepted upon himself the Sheva Mitzvot Noach. So he's allowed to eat a nevela. So you give him the nevela. So he says, when is the nevela going to be metameh like a avatuma? He says it's only going to be when it's fitting for ma'achal adam, when it's fitting for consumption of human being, right? That's what it means for the ger. Aval, if it's going to be nitkalkela and it's not fitting anymore for ma'achal adam, so then it's only going to be rishon letuma. It goes down, not avatuma. It's a rishon letuma. Remember, a rishon letuma, avatuma was the met, right? Now when it goes down, it's not avatuma anymore. It's now a rishon. Rishon is only mitameh ochlin umashkin, food and drinks. It's not going to be mitameh a human being. Okay, the shapir. So now this is going to be good according to what we just mentioned, right? Or he comes and he says, but according to the mandamar tuma chamura, when do we say that tuma nevela is going to be pasul to eat it also for a dog? And therefore he comes and he says, so netzel, which is going to be pasul for achilat adam, is mitameh. Maybe what are we going to say then? Does a netzel of be'ema of a nevela is mitameh, or maybe it was not accepted? That's what we're asking. Okay.
About what?
The footnote, it says in the Chidushei Rabbeinu Peretz, it says the Gemara is talking about the dog and about all these things because there's a contradiction in the pasuk. The pasuk says that a nevela, right, or we're talking about the trefa shemeta, which is the nevela, lakelev tashrichun oto. You have to throw it to the dog, and then the first pasuk says lager asher b'sherecha titenenu. You have to give it to the ger. So therefore, that it's only fitting for a ger. But the other one is saying that it's only fitting for a dog. So how do you reconcile that? One pasuk says that it's fitting for a dog, and another one says fitting for the ger. So he says, Bar Pada comes and he says, to do with tum'ah chamura, there's no tum'ah as long as it's fitting for a ger. But to do with tum'ah kala, it's going to be until it's fitting for a dog. Meaning, it's fitting, you give it to both, but there's different levels. Okay. If it's still 100% ready for consumption, you give it to the ger. Yeah. But if it's already that again, it means the human cannot eat anymore, you give it to the dog. Now, what do I care also? Not only who you're giving it to do tum'ah. Because if it's still going to be on the level of, again, it's tum'ah chamura, it's still mitameh, it's still going to be mitameh adam, because it's an ava tum'ah. But if it's going to be that it's not fitting for consumption anymore, so then it's tum'ah kala, then that's for the dog, so then it's only going to be a rishon tum'ah. It's a lower level of tum'ah, you understood? Fine. So tashema, we're going to try to bring a proof. Himchu ba'ur. Imagine right now they put the shuman, the fats, of a nevelat of tahor, of a nevelah, of a kosher bird, on the fire, until it started like melting, and it became a liquid, and then a person drank it. So you put like the fats, right? The fats, they melt, and now it becomes like a liquid, and now a person comes, and he drinks it. It must have been a, yeah, ta'anug, they must have enjoyed these things. So it says it's going to be tameh. But if you put it in the sun, not on the fire, if you put it in the sun, it's going to be tahor, right? Why? Because basically it becomes disgusting through the heat of the sun, and therefore a human being cannot eat it. Now, if he's like that, if you're going to tell me now it has to be until the dog, afilu b'chamanami. So even if it's going to be in the sun, it should be the same halacha. Okay? So says the Gemara, Eimat memachale batar dasruach b'chama kivan dasrach avalei afar. He says no. If right now it was memacheb, meaning if the sun came and melted it, so then it's already after the sun made it like disgusting, so therefore it's like already considered afar. So you can't even give it to a dog anymore. So if you can't even give it to the dog, that's why it's going to be tahor. Fine. So now we learned in the Mishnah.
It shouldn't be the aspect of the
So it says like this. So now we learned in the Mishnah. Kol hanitzok tahor. If you come and it became a solid, right? That means basically if you're going to come and put a liquid, but tahor, into liquid tameh, the top liquids, right, is still tahor. Meaning that the fact that you poured something, you poured, let's say, the milk on top of the coffee, so the milk which is on top is still tahor. Chutz midvash zifim v'tzapichit, except for dvash, which is very thick, right, and very like, it's a thicker honey. Why? But since it's thick, it connects each other, and then becomes like connected to the top to the bottom, and then everything becomes tameh. Right? Nuna mubet, 50b. Bet Shammai only Bet Shammai say, Afa mikpa, even a type of like a food, which is like a type of like a porridge of grisin v'shelpul, of types of like kitniot, of like beans and things like that. That means basically when you're going to put them from one utensil to another utensil, it connects together. That's called nitzok chibur. Nitzok means when you come and you connect it together, it forms a union. So he says because basically when it's going to stop, right, it's going to be like it comes backwards. So by Rabbi Berchama comes and he asks the following question: Yesh nitzok leochlin or nitzok leochlin? Do we say nitzok by ochlin or not, by food or not? Do we say that it connects to each other or not? Mi amrina, do we say mishum tihit berurire, since it has, right, like it's got like this reed, I don't know how you translate reed in English. It's like something which is strings, right? It's like strings which are connecting each other. And here it does not have any strings. Or dilmar maybe mishum dismuchinu, since it's very thick, and here it's thick, and therefore it's going to come and it's going to connect. So Amar Rava comes and he says, that's when we're going to try to bring a proof. Chelev amet shu shalem. If you have the chelev of a met, which is shalem, it's called a kazait, right? Viticho. So you took this chelev are fats of a met, right? And then what do? You come, you put it on the fire. It's going to be tameh. Why? Because it has kazait basar min hamet. Hayam efurad. What happens if it's separated, like in like small little tiny pieces? Viticho. Now you put it on the fire, right? It's going to be tahor. If you're going to tell me now any nitzok leochlin, that there's not going to be nitzok for foods, right? Shalem viticho na militer. Even if it's going to be shalem, and now you come and you put it on the fire, it should be tahor, right? Why should it be tahor? He says because when you're going to put this kazait in the fire, it's impossible that pieces do not break off, and then it's not a kazait. So it's not going to be a kazait. So therefore, that's it. It's not. It should be tahor. So Amar Bizera says Bizera, and now more bered Ravina Targimina. We came and we answered it. What are we dealing with? Kegon the bahadi the mertachle. When you're coming and you're melting it, sali kamuda lepume de mana. There was like an amud of that came up from the kazait, right, in one shot to the keli, the karash, and then it became congealed. So therefore, everything was together. Meaning, it's not like some parts broke off from the kazait, and therefore you don't know. Here, when it's separating, it's all forming one. And once it's forming one, therefore it's going to become, there is going to be nitzok ba'ochlim. So Elmaleh Ravina comes and he says to Rashi, Tashema Bet Shemai Yonim Bet Shemai says, Afa mikpa shel grisiv shel pul mipnei shen soldin lachorehen. Says, you see, according to Bet Shemai, the reason why there's going to be a connection is because, according to the Tanakama, he comes and he says, right? It's he's not going to argue because of mikpav grisin, it's not going to become one chibur anymore. But with the honey, when you take honey, what happens? It makes everything sticky, makes everything good, so it all sticks together. That's why it becomes one. So says the Gemara, midi iria. Can you compare both cases? Hata mishum desmichin. Sorry. There, it's because it's very thick, so it becomes one. Here, it's because of the ride. The ride is these like strings, right? And therefore, it's going to be a completely different halacha by the two dots. If you remember, we said that if you had like a spoonful, right, of the rakav, which is going to be the, instead of the Mishnah, we were talking about the rakav, is basically became like
Dust.
Dust. It was like the sin, it became like dust, and then a person came and took a spoonful, right? And
the people who they give themselves to burn, to
exactly the cremation. Yeah, cremation. Okay, so he says v'kama shiuro. How much is the malet torvad? Chizkiah says milo fisat hayad. It's the size, right, of the hand without the fingers, meaning the palm of the hand without the fingers. That's already enough.
You see, today people.
Yes, Chizkiah said it's the hand without the fingers. Rabbi Yochanan says milchofnaf. It's the hand with the fingers. Like the entire palm of the hand with the fingers. So tonight we learned in the Braita, milot tarvad grakav. The shiur is, it's from that, it's got the tzbaot and upwards, right, until the top. These are the words that Rabbi mean. Chachamim only, Chachamim say, Mlo chufnaf. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, I understand Rabbi Yochanan, he says like Rabbanan. But Chizkiah, that he says it's the entire hand, right, that it's without the fingers, who does he go like? It's not like Rabbi Meir, it's not like Rabbanan. So Amri, they said, Melo pisat yad that said Chizkiah was Melo kishretz beotav, chad shiura, it's all one shiur. That means basically that if you fill up the hand, right, it's going to be the exact same thing if you're only going to fill up the fingers. Meaning if you put on the fingers, right, or you just put on the hand, right, here, without the fingers, it's the exact same thing. That's what he says. So, Elmaleh Rishimi Barada Lev Papa, Mimayda Hai, Kishetz Beotav Lemala, Lerosh. How do we know that when it says Kishetz Beotav Lemala, it means to the top? So he says, Dilma, maybe it's Lemata Midide, maybe it's lower down from his yadeh, from his hands. The Havale Melofi Satayad, which is going to be Melofi Satayad. So we actually don't have an answer. And then we're going to start tomorrow with Tanu Rabbana.